Her blood saved her, but it also changed her destiny forever. Elena had always been full of life. She loved her small apartment in the city, her routine of morning coffee at the corner cafe, and the friendly chatter she shared with her colleagues at the publishing house where she worked. She was the kind of person who could light up a room with a smile, and her friends often said that her laugh could make anyone's day better. But beneath her cheerful exterior, Elena had always felt slightly different. She sometimes got dizzy spells or sudden weakness, things she never spoke about. She told herself it was just stress or lack of sleep. One chilly morning, Elena left her apartment with a sense of excitement. It was the first day of the annual book fair, and she had volunteered to help her company set up a booth. The streets were busy with people hurrying to work, and the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery made her pause for a moment, just to breathe it in. She smiled to herself, thinking that life, despite its small challenges, was beautiful. As she reached the subway station, a sudden wave of dizziness hit her. The world tilted slightly, and she grabbed the railing to steady herself. "Just a little dizzy," she whispered, trying to shake it off. But it didn't go away. Her legs felt weak and her vision blurred. People around her didn't notice. The city moved fast and everyone seemed busy. She tried to take a step forward, but her knees gave way. Elena fell onto the cold, hard floor of the station and panic crept into her chest. She tried to call out for help, but her voice sounded small, swallowed by the noise of the crowd. Some commuters noticed and rushed to help. A kind man helped her sit up and asked, "Are you okay? Do you need an ambulance?" Elena nodded weakly, but she could feel her strength fading. Within moments, her body refused to cooperate any longer and she lost consciousness. When she opened her eyes, the room was bright and smelled of antiseptic. She was lying on a hospital bed, and the steady beep of a machine reminded her that she was alive. Doctors and nurses moved around her, speaking in urgent tones. She tried to speak, but her throat felt dry and her words came out as a whisper. One of the doctors, a calm middle-aged woman with gentle eyes, knelt beside her. "You're very lucky to be here, Elena," she said softly. "You've had a severe reaction to a rare blood disorder combined with an infection. Without immediate treatment, things could have gone much worse." Elena tried to process the words. Blood disorder, infection. Her mind felt foggy, like a dream she couldn't fully remember. The doctor continued, explaining that she would need a rare blood transfusion to survive. Elena's heart raced as she tried to understand. She had always taken life for granted, thinking that sickness happened to other people, not her. And now, she was suddenly facing something that could take everything away. Her family was called, and soon her parents and younger brother arrived at the hospital. They looked pale and worried. Her mother held her hand tightly, refusing to let go. "You're going to be fine, Elena," she whispered, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. Her father paced the room, muttering under his breath, and her brother sat silently, staring at the machines beside her bed. Time passed slowly, each minute feeling like an hour. Elena could feel her body weakening, and the thought of leaving her family terrified her. The doctors were running tests, trying to locate a matching blood donor, but it was proving difficult. Elena overheard them discussing the rarity of her blood type. The chance of finding a donor in time seemed slim. Panic bubbled inside her chest, but she forced herself to breathe, counting slowly in her mind. 1, 2, 3, each number a small anchor to keep herself grounded. During the long hours, Elena had time to think. Memories of her life flashed before her eyes, the laughter of her friends, the quiet evenings she spent reading by her window, the warmth of her parents' hugs. She realized how much she had taken for granted. She thought about the little moments that made life beautiful and wished she had appreciated them more. The thought of not seeing another sunrise, not hearing the laughter of people she loved, made her heart ache. As the night grew darker, hope seemed to fade. Her family sat by her side, holding her hands, whispering words of encouragement. Nurses checked on her constantly, their soft voices blending with the rhythmic beeping of the machines. The hospital room felt both comforting and isolating. Alina was surrounded by people who cared, yet she felt a strange loneliness, the kind that comes when you face something bigger than yourself. Then, almost like a miracle, news came. A donor had been found. A stranger, somewhere across the city, had the exact rare blood type Alina needed. The nurses moved quickly, preparing for the transfusion. Alina felt a mix of relief and nervousness. She had survived this long, but the real test was just beginning. As the blood started to flow into her veins, she closed her eyes and tried to focus on her breathing. Hours passed, and gradually, Alina felt the strength returning to her body. It was subtle at first, a warmth spreading through her limbs, a lightness in her chest. She opened her eyes and saw her family, tears streaming down their faces, smiling at her. For the first time in what felt like forever, Alina smiled back. She had survived. She had been given a second chance at life. But as she drifted into a restful sleep that night, she noticed something strange. There was a subtle energy inside her, a tingling sensation that ran through her body. It was not painful, but it was different, almost like something had changed. She couldn't explain it, and she dismissed it as a side effect of the transfusion. Yet deep inside, she felt that her life had shifted in ways she could not yet understand. The next morning when she woke, she felt stronger. Not just physically, but in a way that she could not describe. Her senses seemed sharper. She could hear the faint hum of machines in the room, smell the faintest fragrance from the flowers her parents had brought, and even the sunlight felt more vibrant as it streamed through the window. It was subtle, but undeniable. Alina realized that something extraordinary had happened, something beyond medicine or science. Despite the fear and uncertainty, Alina felt a flicker of excitement. Her life had been saved, yes, but it had also changed. The world looked different to her now, more vivid and alive, and she knew deep down that she could not go back to the life she had before. Something inside her had awakened, and though she did not yet understand what it meant, she sensed that her destiny had shifted forever. In that quiet hospital room, surrounded by the people who loved her, Alina took her first deep, steady breath. She knew she had a long road ahead, full of challenges and discoveries. But she also knew one undeniable truth. She had been given a gift, and it would shape the rest of her life in ways she could not yet imagine. And as she closed her eyes once more, she felt a strange, thrilling certainty. Life was no longer just something to live. It was something extraordinary, waiting for her to discover. Alina spent the first few days after the transfusion mostly in the hospital, surrounded by doctors, nurses, and her worried family. Each day she grew a little stronger, and each day the tingling energy she had first noticed in her veins became more pronounced. It was subtle at first, a flicker of warmth, a light buzz, but soon it became impossible to ignore. She could feel it moving through her body, almost like a quiet hum that refused to be silenced. At first, she thought it was just a side effect of the transfusion, something temporary that would fade in time. But soon, she realized it was more than that. The morning she walked to the bathroom alone for the first time, she noticed something unusual. She could hear the softest footsteps in the hallway, faint enough that no one else would have noticed. She could smell the coffee brewing in the hospital kitchen down the hall with perfect clarity. It was as if her senses had been sharpened overnight. Alina tried to ignore it, focusing instead on recovering physically. She began walking in the hospital corridor, her legs steady and strong, her heart beating with a rhythm she had not felt before. The nurses watched her with a mixture of relief and amazement, noting how quickly she regained her strength. Yet no one could explain the strange energy that seemed to radiate from her. By the fourth day, she was allowed to go home. Her apartment, which had once felt small and ordinary, now seemed to glow with a kind of quiet beauty. The sunlight streaming through the windows looked warmer, the colors of her books and furniture sharper, more vibrant. Even the hum of the city outside her window felt different, almost alive, like it was pulsing with energy. Alina walked through her home slowly, touching familiar objects with a sense of wonder. She realized that everything she had taken for granted, the small details of life, suddenly mattered in ways she had never noticed before. Her family stayed with her for a while, helping her adjust to life outside the hospital. They were amazed at how quickly she recovered. Her parents often commented on her radiant energy, as if she carried light inside her. But Alina felt a quiet unease beneath the excitement. She knew that something in her had changed, something deeper than physical strength. She just didn't understand what it was yet. The first real hint came when she went out to buy groceries. Standing at the checkout line, Alina suddenly felt a sharp pull in her chest, as if a small voice inside her was trying to guide her. Without fully understanding why, she looked up and noticed a small child struggling to reach the counter, dropping a bag of fruit. Without thinking, Alina stepped forward and caught the bag before it fell, holding it out to the child's mother. The mother looked at her, eyes wide with surprise. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling slightly. There was something in Alina's presence, something unspoken that made people notice her. It wasn't just her strength or her reflexes, it was something else, something more subtle. She began to notice patterns, small hints of danger or opportunity before they happened. A cup of coffee teetering on the edge of a table, a car approaching too quickly at a crosswalk. She seemed to see these things before anyone else. At first, she thought it was luck, but as the days passed, it became impossible to ignore. Her senses were not just sharper, they were predictive in a way she could not explain. Alina shared her experiences with her best friend, Maya, who listened with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Alina, this sounds unbelievable," Maya said one evening, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. "Are you sure you're not just imagining things? You've been through a lot, your body is recovering, your mind might be overreacting." Alina shook her head. "No, Maya, it's real. I can feel things before they happen. I know when something is about to fall or when someone needs help even if they don't ask for it. I can't explain it, but it's like I can sense the world differently." Maya reached out and took her hand. "Well, whatever it is, it's amazing. But be careful, okay? You've been through something rare and your body is still healing. Don't push yourself too far." Alina nodded, appreciating her friend's concern, but inside, a spark of excitement burned. For the first time in her life, she felt powerful. Not in a boastful way, but in a way that made her feel alive, connected to the world around her. Yet with power came questions. How much could she do? Was this temporary or permanent? And most importantly, who was the stranger whose blood had saved her? Days passed, and Alina began testing her abilities carefully. She would notice small things before they happened. An egg about to drop from the counter, a car about to swerve on the street. Each time the feeling grew stronger, more certain. It was not magic, she told herself. It was something real, something inside her body, inside her mind. And yet, she couldn't shake the thought that the blood transfusion had done more than just save her life. It had changed her. Forever. One evening, as she sat on her balcony watching the city lights, Alina felt a pull, a quiet whisper she could not identify. It was faint, almost like a memory she couldn't place. She closed her eyes and focused on it, letting it guide her thoughts. Suddenly, she had a clear vision of a man walking through a park, holding a small envelope. She didn't know him, but she recognized the feeling of importance, of urgency. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and went out. The streets were quiet and the park was almost empty. She walked slowly, eyes scanning, heart racing. And there he was, the man from her vision. He noticed her approach and nodded slightly, almost as if he had been expecting her. Alina's heart skipped a beat. "Do I know you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No, but I know you," he said. I'm the one who gave you the blood. I never thought I would see you again, but I knew you would need guidance. Things have changed, haven't they? Alina's mind raced. The stranger's blood had saved her, yes, but it had also given her something else. Something she was only beginning to understand. I feel different, she admitted. Stronger, faster. I can sense things I never could before. I don't know why, but it's like I'm more alive. The man nodded. It's true. My blood was rare, yes, but it carried more than life. It carries potential. Your destiny has shifted, Alina, and you have abilities that can make a difference. But with them comes responsibility. You are no longer just living your life. You are shaping the lives of others in ways you don't yet realize. Alina listened, a mixture of fear and excitement washing over her. She had survived death itself, and now she stood at the edge of a new life. She realized that her path was no longer ordinary. The world had changed for her, and she had changed with it. Over the next few weeks, Alina began testing herself in small ways. She would anticipate accidents before they happened, help strangers without them noticing, and even predict small events at her workplace. Each success built her confidence, but also a sense of caution. She knew she had power, but she also knew she had to use it wisely. Her life became a careful balance of ordinary tasks and extraordinary awareness. She still worked at the publishing house, still met friends for coffee, still laughed and shared stories. But beneath the surface, she was learning to navigate a world she could now see in layers no one else could. Every day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new discoveries about herself. And through it all, the memory of the stranger, the one who had given her life and power, remained with her. Alina realized that she owed her life not just to the transfusion, but to the unknown person who had unknowingly set her on a path she could never have imagined. By the end of the month, Alina understood one undeniable truth. Her life had been saved, yes, but it had also been transformed. She was no longer the same person who had collapsed in the subway weeks ago. She had been given a gift, a second chance, and a new destiny. As she stood on her balcony one night, looking out over the city, she felt a quiet thrill. Life had changed forever, and though she didn't yet know all the rules, she knew one thing for certain. She would embrace this new path, discovering the limits of her abilities and the possibilities they held. The world had opened up to her in ways she had never imagined, and Alina was ready to explore it, one step at a time. Alina's life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. What had started as a simple survival story had turned into something extraordinary. Every day brought new surprises, small signs of her unusual abilities, and moments that made her question the limits of what was possible. She had returned to her normal routine at work, but nothing felt normal anymore. The world seemed sharper, clearer, and more alive. At the publishing house, Alina noticed things others didn't. She could sense when someone was upset before they spoke. She could feel the tension in the room when a colleague was about to make a mistake. One morning, while preparing manuscripts for a new author, she noticed a faint trembling in the hands of a young intern named Liam. Without saying a word, she gently placed her hand over his, guiding him to steady his grip. Liam looked at her, eyes wide, as if he had just seen something impossible. How did you know?" he whispered. Alina only smiled softly, saying, "Just pay attention next time." Her coworkers began to notice subtle changes in her. People were drawn to her presence, even if they couldn't explain why. Meetings that used to feel tense now flowed smoothly when she was there. Ideas were shared more freely, and conflicts seemed to resolve themselves. Alina didn't understand why, but she realized that her influence extended beyond herself. She was affecting the world around her in ways she couldn't yet control. At home, Alina began experimenting with her abilities. She tested her reflexes, noticing that her movements were faster and more precise. Objects that might fall or break were caught instinctively before anyone else could react. She could hear whispers from rooms far away, sense subtle changes in people's moods, and even anticipate small accidents on the street. Each new discovery left her both amazed and cautious. She knew that this power came with responsibility, and she didn't want to misuse it. But not all changes were easy to understand. Alina began to notice shifts in her emotions and thoughts. Sometimes, she would feel a wave of sadness or anger that seemed foreign to her, emotions that weren't entirely her own. She started to wonder if the blood transfusion had altered more than her senses, if it had changed the very essence of who she was. The thought frightened her, but it also filled her with curiosity. She wanted to understand the full extent of her abilities, to know who she had become. One afternoon, as she walked through the park near her apartment, she felt a sudden pull, a quiet tug that led her to a bench near the fountain. Sitting there was a man she had never seen before, yet somehow she recognized him. It was the stranger, the one who had donated the blood that had saved her life. He smiled faintly, as if he had been waiting for her. "You're adapting well," he said quietly. "Faster than I expected." Alina sat down cautiously. "I don't understand it," she admitted. "I can feel things, see things before they happen. It's like I'm connected to everything around me. But sometimes it scares me. I don't know who I am anymore." The man nodded, his expression serious. "Change is always frightening, but what you are feeling is part of the transformation. The blood you received carries more than life, it carries potential. And potential, when awakened, will always challenge the way you see yourself and the world." Alina listened intently, realizing that this stranger held answers she desperately needed. "Why me?" she asked. "Why did you choose to save me?" He paused, looking out at the fountain. "I didn't choose you exactly. I acted out of instinct, but the universe has a way of connecting people who need each other. You were ready, even if you didn't know it. But now your life has a new path. You must learn to walk it wisely." The conversation left Alina with a mix of emotions: gratitude, confusion, and a quiet determination. She knew that her life had changed irrevocably, and that she had responsibilities she didn't fully understand. The man's words echoed in her mind long after he left, reminding her that her abilities were not just a gift, they were a duty. As days turned into weeks, Alina began testing the limits of her transformation. She helped people in ways small and large, often without their knowledge. She stopped a child from falling off a swing in the park, prevented a car accident by sensing danger before it happened, and even guided a lost tourist to safety. Each act brought her a sense of purpose, but also a growing awareness of the power she wielded. She realized that she could no longer live a normal, ordinary life. She had become someone extraordinary, and the world had shifted around her as a result. Alina's relationships also began to change. Friends and family noticed her subtle transformation, her confidence, her calm presence, her uncanny ability to read situations. Some were inspired, others puzzled, and a few were wary. Her parents were proud but cautious, often reminding her to rest and take care of herself. Her best friend, Maya, was fascinated, though she sometimes struggled to understand the full extent of Alina's abilities. At work, Alina's influence grew. She became a source of guidance for colleagues, helping them navigate difficult decisions and avoid mistakes. People sought her advice, even when they couldn't explain why they trusted her so completely. Alina realized that her transformation was not just physical or mental, it was deeply emotional and social. She had become a person who could sense the needs of others, anticipate outcomes, and act with precision and care. Yet, with these abilities came challenges. Alina found that she could not always control what she felt or sensed. Sometimes, the emotions of others would overwhelm her, leaving her exhausted and disoriented. She began keeping a journal, writing down her experiences, her visions, and the feelings she couldn't understand. Through this, she began to see patterns. slowly learning to manage the flow of energy and emotions that now ran through her. One evening, while writing in her journal, Alina felt a sudden surge of energy, stronger than anything she had experienced before. Her heart raced, her senses sharpened, and a clear image formed in her mind. A building on the edge of the city, a person trapped inside, needing help. Without hesitation, she grabbed her coat and rushed toward the location. The scene that met her eyes was chaotic. Smoke billowed from the upper floors of the building and people were rushing to escape. Alina moved quickly, her instincts guiding her. She found the trapped person, a young man who had fallen unconscious, and carefully carried him to safety. Firefighters arrived moments later and the man was rushed to the hospital. Alina stood back, watching, feeling a strange sense of calm and satisfaction. She had acted instinctively, saving a life without hesitation. Afterward, Alina realized that her abilities were not just about sensing danger, they were about making a difference. She had been given a gift, yes, but it came with responsibility. She could no longer ignore the needs of the world around her, even in small ways. Each action she took, each life she touched, became a part of her new identity. Her transformation was becoming more visible every day. She moved with grace and confidence, her presence commanding attention without effort. People gravitated toward her, drawn by a sense of safety and trust. Yet, Alina remained humble, aware that her abilities were not for personal gain but for helping others. She learned to balance her extraordinary powers with ordinary life, navigating both worlds with care and awareness. The stranger who had donated his blood remained a mystery. Alina thought about him often, wondering about his motivations and the purpose behind his gift. She knew that meeting him had been no coincidence. Perhaps he was a guide, a messenger, or simply a person who had unknowingly altered the course of her life. Whatever the reason, his actions had set her on a path she could never have imagined. Alina also began to notice subtle changes in her perception of time. Moments seemed to stretch and compress, allowing her to act with precision in situations that required quick thinking. She could anticipate the outcome of conversations, foresee small accidents, and sense the emotions of those around her. It was overwhelming at times, but it also gave her a sense of control and purpose she had never known before. By the end of the 3rd month after her transfusion, Alina had fully accepted that her life had transformed. She was no longer the same young woman who had collapsed in the subway. She was stronger, wiser, and more aware of the delicate balance between life and death, chance and choice. Her destiny had shifted, and she was learning to embrace it fully. Alina understood that her journey was only beginning. The world was full of challenges, mysteries, and opportunities, and she now had the ability to navigate them in ways others could not. Her life had been saved, yes, but it had also been transformed. She had become someone extraordinary, and she knew that she could never go back to living an ordinary life. As she sat on her balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and pink, Alina felt a quiet determination. She had been given a gift, and it was up to her to use it wisely. She would continue to explore the limits of her abilities, help those in need, and discover the full extent of the new life that had been given to her. And deep inside, Alina knew one undeniable truth. Her destiny had changed forever, and she was ready to embrace it. Alina had grown stronger, sharper, and more aware of the world around her. Her life had become a careful balance of ordinary routines and extraordinary abilities. Every day she practiced caution, testing her powers in small ways, helping strangers avoid accidents, guiding lost people, or noticing small details that no one else could see. Yet, as she became more confident in her abilities, she began to feel a growing pressure, a quiet sense that she could not simply use her gift for small acts anymore. One morning, as she walked to work, Alina noticed something unusual. Across the street, she saw a commotion near a construction site. A scaffold had begun to wobble, and a worker was climbing it without realizing the danger. Without thinking, she dashed across the street, her reflexes faster than ever. She reached the worker just as a metal beam shifted, pulling him off balance. Grabbing him with perfect timing, she steadied him against her body. His eyes widened in shock. How did you know?" he asked, trembling. Alina only smiled faintly. "I pay attention," she said softly, helping him to safety. The incident left her shaken but also exhilarated. She realized that her powers were not just about noticing small accidents. They could save lives in critical moments. The thought thrilled her, but it also filled her with a sense of responsibility. She could no longer ignore the risks around her. Every day, every place, every person could be affected by her actions or inaction. Back at home, Alina reflected on her life since the transfusion. She thought about the stranger who had donated his blood, the mysterious gift he had given her, and the sense of destiny that now guided her. She had a new perspective on life. Each moment mattered, every choice had weight, and every action could ripple outward in ways she could not always predict. She realized that she had the power to influence not only individual events but the paths of people's lives. One evening, while returning from work, she noticed a young girl standing alone on a busy street corner. The girl seemed frightened, glancing around nervously. Alina felt a tug in her chest, a sense of urgency she could not ignore. She approached the girl slowly, crouching to meet her eyes. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked gently. The girl shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I can't find my mom," she whispered. Alina felt a surge of empathy and focus. She held the girl's hand and began guiding her through the crowd, sensing the safest path to find her mother. When they finally reached the woman, the girl ran into her arms, sobbing with relief. The mother looked at Alina with gratitude and awe. "Thank you so much," she said, voice trembling. Alina only nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction. But as she walked away, a thought struck her. What if she could not always save everyone? What if she misjudged a situation or failed at a crucial moment? The question lingered in her mind, growing heavier over the next few days. She began to realize that her gift, while extraordinary, carried consequences she could not always predict. Every choice she made could alter the lives of others. She could no longer act on instinct alone. She had to think, to weigh, to consider the outcomes. The responsibility was immense, and it frightened her. Her first true test came unexpectedly. One afternoon, while walking home from work, she noticed a group of teenagers near an abandoned building. They were playing with fireworks, laughing and joking, unaware of the danger. Alina sensed a disaster waiting to happen. A small spark could ignite the old wooden structure, trapping the teens inside. She approached them calmly, trying to warn them without causing panic. "Hey, please be careful with those," she said gently. "That building is unstable." The teenagers laughed at first, thinking she was overreacting. But Alina sensed the tension rising, the small signs of danger that no one else noticed. She focused, letting her intuition guide her actions. One teen tossed a firework toward a loose plank, and Alina reacted instinctively, grabbing the firework midair and tossing it safely to the ground. The teens stared at her, wide-eyed. "How what?" one of them stammered. Alina only smiled softly. "Sometimes paying attention makes all the difference," she said, walking away. The incident stayed with her long after she returned home. She realized that she could not ignore situations where her abilities could prevent harm, but she also understood that she had limits. She could not save everyone, and she could not control every outcome. The weight of this realization settled heavily on her shoulders. That night, she dreamt of the stranger who had saved her. In the dream, he walked through a forest bathed in soft light, motioning for her to follow. "Your gift is more than reflexes and senses," he said, voice calm and steady. "It is insight, understanding, and responsibility. You cannot act recklessly. You must learn to balance power with wisdom." Alina nodded in the dream, feeling a mix of fear and determination. When she woke, the words lingered in her mind. They were not just advice, they were a challenge. Over the next week, Alina began practicing control. She created exercises for herself, testing her reflexes, her perception, and her ability to sense danger without panicking. She would observe crowded streets, imagine potential accidents, and predict outcomes, refining her instincts. The process was exhausting but necessary. She understood that her gift was not just about reaction. It was about preparation, foresight, and ethical responsibility. One evening, as she walked through the park, she sensed something alarming. A small child had wandered too close to the edge of a pond, struggling to keep balance. Alina moved swiftly, her senses guiding her. She reached the child just in time, pulling them back to safety. The mother, who had been nearby but distracted, ran over, her face pale with fear. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened," she said, clutching her child. Alina nodded quietly, feeling a mixture of relief and resolve. She understood that her actions could mean life or death, and she could never treat them lightly. The incidents began to take a toll on her emotionally. Every act of intervention brought satisfaction, but also anxiety. She started questioning her choices, wondering if she had done enough, if she had made the right decisions, if there were dangers she had overlooked. Sometimes, the world felt heavier, filled with possibilities she could not control. Yet despite the fear, she knew she could not ignore her abilities. She had been given a second chance at life, and with it, the power to make a difference. Her work life changed as well. She began noticing patterns of conflict and misunderstanding among her colleagues. Small disagreements could escalate into major problems, but she could sense the subtle cues that indicated the brewing tension. She intervened gently, guiding conversations and offering advice, often without anyone realizing the source of her insight. Slowly, the workplace became calmer, more cooperative, and more productive. Alina realized that her gift extended beyond physical danger. It included emotional and social awareness as well. However, the true test came when she encountered a more serious moral dilemma. One evening, while returning home, she noticed a man shoplifting in a local store. The situation was tense. The store clerk had confronted him, and the man seemed desperate and frightened. Alina could sense the man's fear, the clerk's anger, and the potential for violence. She knew that intervening could prevent harm, but it could also put her at risk or draw unwanted attention. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Please, let's stay calm," she said gently, her voice carrying authority without aggression. The man froze, looking at her as if he could feel her presence. Alina guided him away from the clerk, speaking quietly, reassuringly, until he put the stolen items back and walked out of the store. The clerk looked stunned, unsure what had just happened. Alina simply nodded and left, feeling both relief and exhaustion. She realized that her role was not just to react, but to mediate, to guide, and to prevent conflict before it escalated. By the end of the month, Alina had fully grasped the weight of her gift. Her life was no longer about ordinary concerns or personal ambitions. It was about responsibility, awareness, and action. She had been given a rare chance to shape events, protect lives, and influence the world around her. But she also knew that every action came with consequences, and that she would need wisdom, patience, and courage to navigate the path ahead. Sitting on her balcony one evening, watching the city lights twinkle like stars, Alina reflected on how much she had changed. She was no longer the young woman who had collapsed in the subway. She had become someone extraordinary, capable of sensing danger, preventing harm, and influencing lives in ways that felt almost magical. But she also knew that power alone was not enough. It had to be guided by compassion, thought, and ethics. And deep inside, Alina understood that her journey was far from over. She had learned to embrace her abilities, to act responsibly, and to make difficult choices. But the future held even greater challenges: tests of character, moments of moral uncertainty, and opportunities to shape her destiny in ways she could not yet foresee. She was ready to face them, knowing that her gift was not just a chance at survival, but a responsibility to live fully, wisely, and courageously. Alina had come a long way since that fateful day when she collapsed in the subway. Her life had been saved by a stranger's rare blood, but the gift she received was far more than survival. It was transformation. She had discovered abilities she had never imagined, faced moral challenges that tested her courage, and learned to navigate a world where her presence could change lives. Now, she stood on the edge of something even greater, the full embrace of her destiny. The days that followed were filled with small yet meaningful acts. Alina continued helping people quietly, often without their knowledge. She guided pedestrians away from accidents, assisted lost children, and prevented minor disasters in her neighborhood. Each success gave her a sense of purpose, but also a deeper understanding of her responsibilities. She knew that every action mattered, and that sometimes the smallest choices could ripple into lives she might never see. One morning, as she walked through the park, she sensed something unusual. A young woman sat on a bench, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched a crumpled letter. Alina approached cautiously, her instincts guiding her. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. The woman looked up, her eyes filled with fear. I don't know what to do," she said. "I think I'm in danger." Alina felt the subtle tremors of anxiety radiating from her, the unspoken tension that hinted at trouble. Without hesitation, she sat beside the woman and listened. As the story unfolded, Alina realized that the woman was being threatened by someone who wanted to take advantage of her situation. Alina's mind raced, sensing the safest path to help her without drawing attention or putting anyone at risk. By the end of the day, the situation had been resolved quietly. The woman was safe, and the danger had been removed without incident. Alina felt a quiet satisfaction, but also a deep awareness of the weight she carried. Her abilities allowed her to intervene in ways others could not, but they also demanded wisdom, patience, and careful judgment. Each life she touched reminded her that her gift was not simply power, it was responsibility. At home, Alina reflected on her journey. She thought about the stranger who had given her blood, the person who had unknowingly changed the course of her life. She wondered if she would ever meet him again, or if he had simply been a guide, a catalyst for the transformation she had undergone. Either way, she knew that her life was no longer her own. It was intertwined with the lives of others, shaped by choices she had never expected to face. Her friends and family noticed the changes too. Her parents often commented on her calm presence, her confidence, and her ability to read situations. Maya, her best friend, sometimes watched Alina with awe, marveling at how she had become someone who seemed to understand the world in ways others could not. Yet, despite the admiration and respect, Alina remained humble. She understood that her abilities were a gift, not a privilege, and that they carried a responsibility that could not be taken lightly. One evening, as she walked through the city streets, Alina noticed a crowd gathering near a bridge. A man had climbed onto the railing, clearly in distress, and people below were unsure how to help. Alina felt a surge of urgency. Her instincts told her that time was critical, and hesitation could be fatal. Without thinking, she pushed through the crowd, her presence commanding attention. "Please step back," she called gently, her voice carrying both authority and calm. The man froze, startled by her calm yet firm tone. Alina approached slowly, focusing on the subtle cues of his body language, sensing his emotions and thoughts. She spoke softly, reassuringly, guiding him away from the edge with a patience and clarity that seemed to reach beyond words. Moments later, the man was safely back on solid ground, and the crowd erupted in relieved applause. Alina stepped back, her heart racing but steady. She realized that this was not just about reflexes or prediction. It was about connection, empathy, and understanding. Her gift allowed her to reach people in ways that went beyond the physical, touching lives on an emotional and psychological level. The incident sparked a deeper realization in Alina. She understood that her destiny was not just about saving individual lives. It was about creating positive change wherever she could, using her abilities to guide, protect, and inspire others. She began to see patterns in the world around her, noticing opportunities to make a difference, small or large. Every interaction, every decision became a chance to shape outcomes for the better. Over the following weeks, Alina's sense of purpose grew stronger. She began volunteering at local organizations, helping people navigate challenges they could not face alone. She offered guidance, protection, and support quietly, never seeking recognition. Her presence alone seemed to inspire trust and confidence, and people were drawn to her, even if they could not explain why. At the publishing house, her influence also became more profound. Conflicts between colleagues began to resolve more smoothly, and productivity increased. Alina often sensed misunderstandings before they escalated, guiding conversations with subtle insight and empathy. Her coworkers began to rely on her quietly, trusting her judgment even when they did not understand the source of her wisdom. Yet with all her successes, Alina also faced challenges. There were moments when her abilities overwhelmed her, emotional currents that she could not fully manage, situations where danger was unavoidable, and choices that weighed heavily on her conscience. She realized that being extraordinary was not always easy. It required balance, patience, and the courage to face the unexpected. One night, as she sat on her balcony watching the city lights, Alina thought about the stranger who had given her life. She wondered about his intentions, his knowledge, and the reason he had chosen to help her. She realized that he had trusted her to grow, to learn, and to embrace her destiny fully. And in that moment, she understood that her journey was a partnership with life itself, a partnership of responsibility, awareness, and action. The following day, Alina faced a challenge that tested her abilities in a new way. A nearby building had caught fire, and people were trapped inside. Emergency services had arrived, but the situation was chaotic and lives were at risk. Alina felt the familiar pull of urgency. She moved swiftly, her senses guiding her through smoke-filled corridors and debris, helping people escape safely. Her actions were precise, calculated, and instinctive. By the time the firefighters fully gained control, everyone was safe, and Alina's presence had prevented what could have been a tragedy. Afterward, she stood outside, watching the building burn safely in controlled conditions. Her heart was calm, yet her mind was alive with reflection. She realized that her gift was not about heroism or recognition. It was about being present, aware, and ready to act when others could not. She had learned that her destiny was intertwined with the lives of those around her, and that her actions could shape the world in ways she had never imagined. Over time, Alina's life became a rhythm of ordinary routines and extraordinary responsibilities. She still went to work, met friends, and laughed like she always had. Yet beneath the surface, she carried a deep awareness of the world, a sense of purpose, and the knowledge that her actions mattered. Every day was an opportunity to learn, grow, and make a difference. She also began to reflect on her own personal growth. The person she had been before the transfusion, the young woman who had collapsed in the subway, seemed like a distant memory. She had become stronger, wiser, and more aware. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and moral dilemmas, and she had emerged capable, compassionate, and determined. She realized that her destiny had been reshaped by the choices she had made, the lives she had touched, and the responsibility she had embraced. One quiet evening, Alina received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a simple note: "You are ready. Trust yourself." She smiled, feeling a sense of connection to the stranger who had started her journey. The words were not just encouragement, they were affirmation. She understood that her life was no longer ordinary, but it was full of meaning, purpose, and opportunity. She had been given a gift, and she had learned to use it wisely. Alina spent the next months quietly mentoring others in subtle ways, helping people recognize their own potential and guiding them through challenges without revealing her abilities. She became a quiet force for good in her community, a presence that inspired trust, confidence, and hope. Her influence extended beyond her immediate actions, shaping the lives of people she would never meet and leaving an unseen but lasting impact. Through all of this, Alina never forgot the lesson she had learned. That power carries responsibility, that awareness must be paired with wisdom, and that every life is valuable. She had been given a second chance, not just to survive, but to live fully and purposefully. She understood that her destiny was not predetermined. It was created through her actions, choices, and the courage to embrace her extraordinary path. As she stood on her balcony one evening, watching the city bathed in golden light, Alina felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that her journey would continue, that challenges and opportunities would arise, and that her abilities would grow in ways she could not yet foresee. But she also knew that she was ready. She had embraced her destiny, learned to wield her gift responsibly, and discovered the profound difference one life could make. Alina smiled, feeling the quiet energy that had become a part of her. Her life had been saved, transformed, and elevated to something extraordinary. She had been given a gift, faced challenges, and emerged capable and compassionate. And now, fully aware of her potential and her responsibilities, she was ready to continue her journey, shaping her destiny, helping others, and living a life that was both ordinary and extraordinary, intertwined with the lives of those around her forever.